Welcome back. So while I was preparing for the video, what I did in between episode is very simple. What I did is I just changed this core setup and I changed it with this script. You can find this down in the video description. I'll make sure to leave a link down in the video description. So I've already made the wheels, and what I'll do now is I'll just delete everything and I'll make it from scratch just to show you how it's done. So what I'll do is I'll just delete the core. There we go. And if you're following these tutorials, which a lot of you actually do, so if you're actually following it, what the first step of setting up the core is to just create an empty game object. So before you do anything, you just want to make sure that the game object is set to 0. If you don't set this to 0, later you're gonna have problem with the wheels. And then name your car. So in this case, I have car 1. I'll just name it car 1 for now. Here is my car model. And if you remember the last video, what I mentioned is that the blue axis or the blue arrow should face the forward. And as we can see now, the car is not really facing forward. So what you can do now is make a plane and position it to 0. And then later on, when you place the car, you can just place it on the position 0 and the car will always stay flat like this, as we can see. Can just lift it up a little bit. There we go. Now it looks like it's flat, which is perfect. It's just a tip that you're going to face in the future if you're actually making the game. Okay, next step is to unpack it and then remove what you don't need from the car. I don't need these collision meshes, so I'll just delete everything like this. There we go. Okay, so now we have the wheels, and I think this car uses a slightly bigger wheel for the rear, so I'll just really quickly compare them. As we can see, one of them is just slightly bigger. So what we're going to do in this case is make a second. It's actually a little bit thicker as well. So what we're going to do is make 2 separate wheels. Actually, I'm just gonna make one and make it a little bit thinner like this, instead of just having it stick out like this. Or maybe it's better this way. Okay, I'll just leave it this way, and then later on, if we need it, we can just tweak it. So before we do anything, we just want to get these out, delete all the other wheels, and just leave the car like this. Obviously fix this. And I think I knew a way of doing that. It's just by doing this global. And I also wanted to mention that a lot of you want me to upload uncut videos. So that's why the videos are a little bit longer right now, maybe 20-25 minutes. So I hope you enjoy the content. Anyway, I already made a wheel prefab. Here it is. Don't worry, I'll make a new one. I'll just show you how it looks like. It just looks like a normal wheel, but the problem or the difference is that the scale is on 1. However, the child can be whatever scale we want it to be. So what I'm going to do, delete this, and I'll just create some new tires. So first of all, I'll create wheel front, duplicate that, wheel rear. Okay, now if you remember, we always do is we just reset this. We also reset this. But we can't reset this because this has a rotation. As we can see in here, it's in -90. So it just sits like straight with the car. So what I'm going to do is reset the position only. Do the same for this. The scale can sit at 100 like this, and it's totally fine. So now I just need to select the rear one. I think this is the rear one, since this is just a little bit tighter or smaller. And what I'll do is I'll just make this a child of the front car, and then this child of the rear car. And now we're done with the wheels. So what we can do now is take this, make it a prefab, take this, make it a prefab. Okay, now we have the prefab, we do not need a single thing. Okay, now we need to do some work with the car. So we want to make sure that it has the meshes in here, and then later on we're going to use this vehicle creator to add the components in for us, because we don't want to go and add the components to each car we add, because in the next video what I'm going to do is add some new cars, so I don't want to go ahead and manually position the wheels. So I made this handy editor script. If we take a look at this script does not reference any other script. So what it references is only the Unity components, which should not give you a single error, as long as you use this Unity version 2021.3.10. Okay, I'm just gonna dock this right here for convenience sake. And what I'm going to do is take this car and put it into the car slot. So we're gonna see the status is unchecked right now. Then what I'm going to do is take this has a different rear tire. So we conveniently made two prefabs, and you just drag them and drop them. So wheel prefab is for the front wheel, wheel prefab rear is obviously for the rear wheels. So what I'm going to do is just run the checks, and this is going to show me that the car is ready. So what it did is it added a component of rigid body, it added a component of center of mass, which is in the old way of adding the center of mass. I should probably change this. I'll change it in the next video, I hope, if I don't forget. This system works well, by the way. What you can do is just take this center of mass, place it somewhere in the middle of the car where you want the mass to be. The only problem with this is that it's not connected, and as we remember, the car manager takes in these car components, which we are going to tweak in just a moment. And then what we need is one more thing, and that is a collider. So usually you should add the collider manually, because every car has a different collision body. So for convenience sake, again, I'll just add in a cube, sort of stretch the cube like this. There we go. And always make sure that the position is on 0. This position does not matter, because it's just the height, as we can see. Okay, just gonna disable the mesh render, keep the box collider, and now we can move on. So next in the list, on to-do list, is to add the components. And usually this should have added the car manager and so on, but I removed those just to make this script less buggy, because you might not have the same script names that I use, for example car setup or whatever. And then we can create the colliders. This should create 4 colliders in the exact same spot as we can see in here. There we go, everything works well. So the last step is to create the wheels, and if we create the wheels, it should space them out a little bit, and it should also create the meshes, but it has failed already. Now, I hope you can see the problem why it failed. I'll give you a second to figure it out. And if you didn't figure it out, in the beginning of this video I said that the blue axis should face the same way that the car faces. So obviously we can't change the blue axis because it's the world axis, but what we can change is the actual car itself. So I'm just gonna take the car, spin it around. There we go. Now we have the car facing the right direction. Okay, now we can see the wheels are matching the direction of the car, and all that's left for us to do is to change the suspension distance. Usually it's very low. Then what you can do is play with these values a little bit. This has a very weird bug that it updates on mouse movement, which is a little inconvenient, but it works. Okay, so we're ready with placing the car wheels and the car colliders and whatever. And the party piece of this script that I wrote a little while ago is the camber. So this has a camber system which works wonderfully, and it looks wonderfully. Just adding a little bit of camber makes the car just a slight bit better looking and sort of angry. We can add rear camber as well, like this, and it just looks amazing, especially with this car. Okay, now let's move on to the next step, which is to just close this tab and continue working with our car. So the one thing that I wanted to fix in this video is the car manager, or the game manager, sorry. So right now I don't have a game manager. I just have this car, and I think this is my favorite car. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so let's just create an empty game object called game manager. This should be called reference manager, but I'm just going to call it game manager for now. We're going to worry about it later. So for now, this script just does nothing. So what I'll do is just delete everything, and I'll just hold some references in here. So the one reference that I want to hold is, if we go at the car manager, this has a input system. So what I want to do is I want to just disconnect this from here and move it to here, because I don't want to just go ahead and add in a input handler in each and every car. So what I'll do is I'll make the work easier to myself, and I'll just add it to the game manager. So it's very simple. You just do a public input handler input. This should have been with a capital I, because then I could have said input handler and it would not have interfered, but now it's the same and it will interfere. So I'll just call it input for now and just leave it like this. There we go. Okay, we should have a input right here. I have an input handler in here. Input handler does not require anything. You just have to place it like this and it just works. It just creates an input constants, which is not a mono behavior script. It can work on its own. So we're all good in that. The only adjustment that we have to make is in the car manager itself. So this already contains some references, and we're just gonna add some more. So the one reference that we're gonna add is the game manager. Just call it game manager like this. And in the start, since we're gonna have just one game manager, what we can do is say game manager is equal find component of type game manager. Now, if you have more than one game manager in your scene, this will not work. So since I will make sure that there will be only one game manager, I'll just create it like this. And instead of just getting this as a component, what I'll do is I'll just reference the game manager dot input. There we go. As simple as that. Okay, we can save that. We are all good in that department. So next what we can do is we can add in, we don't need to fill this by the way, we can do just this. This will not work right now, I think. Yeah, it's not gonna work because we're missing a car engine. Okay, we're gonna fix that. Car engine is right here and wheel animator is right here. So the point of making these as components and not making a like a car controller, just one script, is that later on what we can do is just disable this and this, and it should work just fine. So now what we can do, or actually what we should do, is add in these references. So again, I don't want to bore myself to death by adding those references, so I'll just go ahead into the car manager, create some more references. So what I'll do is I create a new header, call it wheels. In the wheels we'll have a public list of wheel, actually no, we should call it wheel collider. There we go. And I'm just gonna call it wheel colliders. Then I'll have another list, and this time of transforms, and call it wheel meshes. Next, what I'm going to do is make this a hide in inspector. So a trick that I use of getting components that I need, and I know where the components are, is very simple. So in here, what you can do is declare a public transform wheel collider container. What we can do with this container is just run a simple for loop, and then what we can do is fill this array with the elements that are inside the container. What I'm going to do is do the same thing, but this time for the wheel meshes. There we go. I'll just delete this to show you that you can actually get this without going through a lot of trouble. So what I'll do is I'll just create a new void. Okay. So we'll start with the wheel colliders container, and this is the trickier one. So the idea is that this car will have a container of wheel meshes and wheel colliders. So what we can do is create a reference of this game object right here, and then you can just do a loop and get all of the childs or the children. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. The problem is that this is a wheel collider and it's not a wheel transform. So it's a little bit tricky, but we're going to do it anyway. So just declare a for loop for now, and then we'll work from there. So the for loop will go through the wheel collider container child count. So let's write that, wheel container collider dot child count. There we go. And then what we can do is add to this list. But what do we add in here? It's actually a little complicated, but it's not too complicated. So we'll say wheel colliders, I think. Yeah, that's the list dot add. What do we add in here? Well, we want to add the component of the child that we find in here. How do we do that? That's actually very simple. Wheel collider container dot get child in the index of I. This I is obviously the loop I. There we go. And then get component wheel collider. Just like this. This should not have a single error as long as we have a wheel collider container with children inside, and the children should have a wheel collider component. Okay, now let's move on to the wheel meshes. The same procedure. I'll just do another for loop like this. This time we'll go through the wheel meshes dot child count, and then this time it's a little simpler. Wheel meshes dot add wheel meshes container dot get child in the index of I dot transform, just like this. So what I'll do is I'll just call this method into the start, get components like this, and if everything works fine, we should see some results. So let's see if we've done anything correctly. Okay, so now we have some more references in here. It's getting a little messy, but I'll clean this up in just a minute. So first we have these empty lists, which we should not add or delete. We should leave them at 0. And then we just add the containers. So these are the wheel meshes. Just gonna put them in here. The wheel colliders, just gonna put them in here. This does not need anything. And then we can just hit play. If I've done everything correctly, we should find them. Yep, there we go. The beauty of this is that we have 4 wheels and we also have the sorting the correct way. And as we can see, we already have some errors. Okay, now that we have the references in here, we do not need them in here or in here. Okay, this tutorial is getting just a little long, but I'll just finish this and I'll move on to the next video. Okay, we have the core engine. What we're going to do is, first of all, actually, let's leave this into the public. And into the start, we'll just instantiate these. So since we have that into the car manager, we can just reference the car manager. Before we do that, I'm just gonna make this hide in inspector so we get a cleaner look. I'm gonna save that and I'm gonna go back into the car engine. So first let's get the references in the car engine and then we can move on into the wheels animation. Okay, so before we do anything, we need a reference to the manager, this one. And how do we get that? Just get the component, get that, and we're all set. After we do all of that, what I'm going to do is, again, I'm just going to declare a block of code. I'm just going to say, again, get components like this. Just quickly create that method somewhere in here like this, and there we go. Now we have that method, and all we want to do is take these wheels and just make them equal to this wheels. Where it is, this one. Okay, seems easy enough. So I'm just gonna take this, just gonna copy it, very simple. Just gonna say wheels is equal to car manager dot wheel colliders. That's it. That's how simple it is. Okay, let's make sure that I call the method right here. It's in the start, and let's just hit save. If everything goes correctly, we should have those references into the car engine. Okay, let's see if it worked. Okay, we have the references right here. Still getting an error somewhat. Now, for some reason, this is being called before I get the wheels, which is weird. This should not happen. I don't know why it's happening. And also, the input is not working. Okay, we have ourselves a little bit of a problem. There's 2 errors that is happening. Okay, the problem is that the wheel animator is not working. Let's just quickly see why the input is not being set. Oh, that's why it's not set. I forgot to put this in here. Okay, now that we have the references on the car engine, let's go and do some cleaning. So first of all, let's hide this in inspector so we get a cleaner look. Let's put this down here somewhere. Okay, now let's do the same process for the wheel animation, animator, whatever you might call it. So same process, create a new, just like this. And now we have a car manager. Let's use a car manager. Wheel meshes is equal to car manager dot wheel meshes, just like this. Okay, now it should work fine. Okay, so I found the problem. The problem is that this start sometimes does not execute as it should be, or as it's intended, I should say. So the problem is that sometimes Unity tries to execute this script before this script, and we want this script to be executed first. So an easy workaround for that is to just use a wake function to the main script that you want to execute first, and then what you can do is just add the components, and the components can have a start. So this awake should be called first, and then what you can do is add the components like this, and it should work fine. And so it does in this scenario. I forgot to add in a camera, but it actually works. As we can see, steering multiplier 40 works like a charm. So there we go. We already have a driving simulator. It is a little bit twitchy because I don't know why. As we can see, it's slipping because it's not using the formula, but that's okay. I'm happy that we got in this stage in just episode 4. This is actually brilliant. And it looks super cool.